Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to give you guys 5 more mistakes that I made when collecting Pokemon cards, so hopefully you guys don't make this mistake. So I've been collecting for a little over 3 years now, so obviously I made quite a lot of mistakes, and hopefully these tips will prevent you guys from making some of the same foolish moves that I have. Some of these tips might be obvious, some maybe not as obvious, so hopefully you find some kind of value in it. The first mistake that I made was not making more detailed analysis before purchasing any card above, let's say, the $250 price range. So some of these cards you see here are above that threshold. First things first, some of the most simple questions to ask yourself is, do I really need this card? Is this card, critical to my collection? Or can this money be used elsewhere? I think sometimes, although it seems really obvious, we often forget to sort of revisit this. So yeah, the opportunity cost of this money, maybe currently it doesn't seem like too much, but I think oftentimes when we buy cards, there's a lot of emotion attached. So I think, let's say if you're buying a childhood card, you might often forget that, although the card is really cool, the price tag may be quite high as well. And I feel like sometimes, if we're all caught up in the emotion, we kind of neglect the actual amount of money, because, some of these cards are hundreds and hundreds of dollars, right? But then maybe to the hobby or someone within the hobby, it doesn't seem like that much, right? But then if you ask anyone that's not collecting, it could seem like a lot of money just poured into cardboard, right? So these are goods that are more, I would say, luxury. We don't need this. Now, since some of these collectibles are getting more and more expensive, we do need to constantly revisit, could this money be used elsewhere? Would this money be used in the near future? Well, for myself personally, I found what really helps was budgeting. So allocating a certain amount of money for each month on Pokemon cards, and then let's say for a month I didn't find the card that I want, I kind of just carry forward that dollar amount into the next month, so maybe my budget for the following months might be a little higher. And I think one of the biggest traps is I think nobody really talks about it, but I think auctions, although it seems like, it's where the best deals are, right? Cheaper than buy now generally. Auctions are great in that way, but I feel like, let's say you're in a bidding war for a card that's nostalgic, or holds some kind of value to you. Maybe you had it as a kid. I feel like for myself, I definitely made the mistake where I got too caught up on trying to win this card, maybe paying a little bit too much, maybe a little bit too high compared to last solds, just to make sure I secure it, even though deep down I know that another copy is probably going to come up again. I kind of just wanted to win the auction, like we're humans. I think naturally we do like winning. So I think, so there are times where you gotta like go into auctions with a price point in mind, and then if you don't hit the price point, or if you don't get it for the right price, I think, you shouldn't feel too bad about it. But I think for myself, at least before, I feel like, when I'm bidding on an auction, I felt the need to just win, despite having to pay a little bit extra. I'm not sure what the psychology behind that is, but that was something that I noted down. So I thought I'd share it. So maybe if you guys have the same experience, please let me know. I'm not the only one that have this. You can see that quite a lot of auctions also go above the price of a buy it now listing. So, that could also mean that other people are doing the same thing as me, where, you're just so fixated on trying to get that winning bid that you might be, maybe last minute trying to snipe and, maybe putting in an offer that is higher than what you actually want to pay for it. So yeah, having a plan and a price point that you already researched prior to going into an auction is really important. Let's say there's a card that you really want. What you can also do is just, keep track of it. Like save it as a search listing so you can keep going back to it. And then I think what this also allows you to do is it gives you time to think about whether you really want a card or not, whether you really want or desire a specific that card specifically, or you just suddenly feel like you want it. It could be an impulsive thing, so maybe you don't really want that card. Give yourself time, like maybe like a couple weeks or a week, to think about it before you actually make a purchase, or before you seriously consider buying some of these cards. I think that is a great way to make sure that, you're buying something that you truly want in your collection. However, oftentimes what I find is that, thinking about it after a few weeks, I kind of realize that maybe, hey, I don't want that card, especially at that high price. Maybe I want, let's say, another card for a cheaper price. Or, I'd rather spend my money elsewhere, if that makes sense. So I think really thinking about it before making any irrational purchases really helps. Some of you guys might say, what if, a rare opportunity presents itself? But, I think from my experiences, any kind of set cards like the ones you see here, especially even some of the more rare ones like the Gold Star cards, that Gold Star Groudon there, like I think another auction is bound to come up. Like these are all set cards. There's always another copy, right? So I think, we shouldn't get caught up in the fear of missing out for these. Just because, you can think about it, and there's likely going to be another copy that gets listed, or, an auction pops up. I think the only exception is for some of the more niche trophy cards, where not many pop up. But I think for the majority of you guys, we're probably set card collectors or Japanese or English. We often think that another copy probably might not come up as soon, and we want it as early as possible. By being a bit more patient in that manner, we can definitely score a better deal. So yeah, what I just explained is sort of cards for, I would say, above that $250 price range. Something that's a little bit more pricier, I would say. Definitely we should think more about it before making that purchase. Compared to, let's say a cheaper card or a cheaper slab or something that, wouldn't hurt our wallet as much. But I think once you get into that few $100 range, I think that money is actually quite impactful. For myself, I definitely want to make sure that this is a card that I want in my collection, at least for a long time, in order for me to pull the trigger and try to look for a copy. So the second mistake that I made was taking past price history too seriously. So what this meant was, before you buy a card, right, you often look at what are the last solds, how much is this card going for, how much did other collectors pay for it. What you often do is, go into eBay last solds. I think that's what most people do, but I think the issue with eBay last sold is for some of the more niche cards, you might not have a accurate representative price point. For a card that maybe doesn't sell too often, like maybe some of these, let's say these EX cards, right? So for some of these EX cards, maybe they don't sell as often. I'm just using this as an example. The issue is, the price points might not be that accurate because it doesn't sell that often, and it's auction, maybe it's not representative. Maybe there are more buyers out there that just simply didn't see the listing. Because I think we got to remind ourselves that Pokemon cards at the end of the day, kind of a pretty open market. It's not like it's getting traded, thousands and thousands of shares every day like the stock markets. These are, kind of niche goods. So I think a lot of time it's also just random, like luck based, or whether actual buyer is on the website at the right time. I used to take the past price history too seriously, so I would track it, but then, always think that I'm getting a good deal. Yeah, so sometimes maybe the right buyers were there at the right time, so the prices go higher on an auction. However, other times, maybe there's, impulsive buyers, or card was influenced by hype. I think that's a big thing. So when hype is involved, it often inflates the price above what it's supposed to be, or what the sort of equilibrium point is. So what I felt was it created a false sense of sort of security. Like I thought I was getting a good deal, but I wasn't realized that maybe a card was getting hyped, or, I think the Gold Stars were an example. Like there was an era where people were trying to buy up as many Gold Stars as possible. So I think that created an artificial demand, and then a shortage in supply, and then the prices shot up. So making more value investing moves, so finding cards that are good fundamentally. So this is like things like rarity, the art, the popularity of the Pokemon, potential supply. So for example, we know that Gold Stars are 1 in every 72 boxes. So we have a good feel for some of the rarity of these, not this Gold Star, but this Gold Star. So these are some of the fundamentals I look for before buying cards. So I think this way, I think the price history is a little bit more solid, if that makes sense. However, some of the newer cards, the price history can shift so much just within a few weeks, right? especially the modern cards. I feel like they fluctuate so much. So one week, maybe you're saving quite a lot of money by getting a good auction. Then you could be actually losing money the next week. Price history is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but I think there are a lot of other factors you want to consider before buying a card. Because before, when I just started in this hobby, I would look at, let's say, a card that I might be interested in, and then I would look at the price history, so the last solds, and I found that, hey, this listing is actually kind of cheaper than the last sold, so I would buy it. But then a few weeks later, the price tanks and I overpaid for it by quite a bit. Making purchases based on I think what I believe the card's intrinsic value or what I think the card should be valued, probably a better route to go than just solely relying on the price history. And as an added tip, instead of looking at just eBay last sold, you can also use websites such as 130point.com. This will show you the past history of the card. It's especially useful for graded cards, and you can see what their last solds were across different websites, not just eBay. So that includes the different auction sites, such as PWCC, Golden, Heritage. I think the really nice thing is it also shows you the best offer accepted listings, which eBay for some reason doesn't show you. So eBay will just show a crossed out price, but 130point.com will actually tell you the exact price that the best offer was accepted for. I think the last point to this is that, I was buying some very niche cards before. I think and now looking back, some of these cards sell so infrequently that the price that I saw could be like a fake bid. I wouldn't know, or it could be a canceled bid, because previously I thought I was getting a great deal on a level X card, but it turns out that the same cert sold not too long ago, but I didn't notice it. I didn't match up the certification. So I think if you're buying any graded cards, it's really good if you double check the cert number and see if it was last sold literally like a few days ago, because that could mean like a fake sell. So you shouldn't take that price point seriously. There's a lot of shield bidding and fake bids going around, so I think it is important to also just make sure that the listings you're looking at is likely legit. Seeing sale history from reputable sources, I think, is very important and ideal, but sometimes I know that's not the case. But just trying to get as many sort of replicates or number of sales of that card specifically will likely lower your risk. So I think the price history is less reliable for more niche cards. The more sort of rare and maybe scarce a card is, the less sales it has, right? So I think at that point, the sale price could really just depend on who is in the market to bid that day. I think there's so many variables when it comes to cards that don't sell very often. However, let's say you take a really popular card, like these cards, like a set card of a popular Pokemon, these are likely to sell a lot. So this card probably sells many copies every single day. So I think the price point for this is a bit more accurate than a more niche card like this Armaldo EX, which probably doesn't sell too often because not too many people are in the market for this specific Pokemon and the EX card. So I think depending on what you're trying to collect, just keep that in mind. Price history is an important factor, but it shouldn't be your sole basis for deciding whether you want to buy that card or not. So the third mistake that I made was trying to grade everything. This might sound a little stupid, but when I just entered the hobby, I was buying a bunch of cards thinking, hey, I'm going to try to grade them. And, I love this card. I'll keep it in my collection. But, maybe some of the duplicates all end off selling, and maybe I can make a little bit of money to reinvest back in my collection. Well, I learned the hard way that that's not the best way to go about it. I think we should ultimately grade because we love the card and we want it in our collection. It has a sentimental value. Or, if you want to boost the value of your card, that's another valid reason to grade your Pokemon cards. However, you shouldn't probably be grading everything, especially if it doesn't mean that much to you and it might not get a high grade. It could actually, cost you quite a bit financially. I love bringing up this story because it's one of my mistakes. So I opened a Triumphant pack. I think the video is still on my channel. I pulled this card. It was pack fresh, right? I was like, hey, let's just send it in for grading. And it came back an 8. So this was another lesson I learned the hard way. Just because a card is pack fresh, it doesn't mean it's going to get a high grade. I would say 8 is a pretty below average grade, especially if you're trying to get some value out of it. So I definitely lost money on this, but I think I keep this card around as a reminder to not grade stupidly. So yeah, for sure, pre-grade your card. Just because it came out of a pack, a lot of times, these will have some kind of whitening. Maybe this one doesn't as much, but a lot of times it's the print lines is something that you can't control. I think there's quite a few here. Yeah, I think there's some print lines going across this card. So some factors like print lines and some whitening and centering you can't control. So I think you shouldn't be grading everything, especially if you want to maximize the financial value of the card. But again, by all means, if the card's sentimental to you or it's important to you in some way, grade it. Grade whatever you want. But again, in terms of just the financial aspects, it might not be the best idea. I think some of the additional things that maybe beginners in the hobby don't really consider is that aside from a flat $15 grading fee, there's going to be like let's say for PSA, there's a membership fee. There's obviously shipping to PSA and shipping back to you. There's insurance. And if you're international, there's sometimes maybe duties or custom fees, which I think often are overlooked. So these factors combined, it might not be that good of a financial decision to try to submit every card. I think the PSA membership is over was it $100 to $150? I think it's already a big sort of investment to begin with if you're trying to grade your cards yourself using the cheaper tier. Sometimes I find like if you're just a casual collector like myself, it's not worth for me to spend so much money on the grading process and taking the risk. Sometimes I find that it's better to just buy the 9. So for myself, I am primarily a 9 collector. Of course, that's myself. You can buy, 10 or 8s, whatever floats your boat. But I know that I like a 9 grade. That's the grade I prefer to collect in. And so I can just buy the 9 directly and not have to risk, let's say getting an 8 and, wasting a bunch of money where I could just probably buy the 9 already. So I think that's a lesson that I learned, and I talked about this in the past. There are times where I try to buy minty copies of cards from my local game store as well as on eBay, but then it turns out when I send it in, there was several sort of maybe hollow scratches that I didn't notice, and I get an 8 or a 7, where I could have just spent that same money, basically the grading fee plus the card fee, and then save a lot of times and just get the 9 already graded instead of me going out and spending so much money and my effort and my time to just get a bad grade where I could have just bought the already graded version, because I feel like so many people were trying to grade their cards to boost their value. So I feel like there's an sort of extra supply of graded Pokemon cards. So I don't think it's a bad time to pick up some graded copies. Hearing from other people that's been in the hobby longer than myself, the number of mint sort of rare cards, such as like maybe EX cards or WotC Hollows and maybe some of the gold stars, these sort of more rare cards, the number of mint copies on the market is drastically lower than previously. I think this is true for both the English and the Japanese markets. People are catching on. The people saw that during the pandemic, grading your Pokemon cards could result in a huge profit. So I think a lot of people have scooped up all the mint copies, or not all of it, but a lot of the mint copies and graded it already. So I think this is not a bad time to pick up some very mint cards like 9s for your collection. Some of these are not that much more expensive than the raw cards. I think it presents excellent opportunity and value. I think the fourth biggest mistake is not emphasizing the condition of the card as much and factoring that into my buying decision. When I just started in the hobby, I often bought cards just because it looked nice or it was a big lot. I wasn't so careful in picking out cards that were in super good condition. They said near mint or mint, and I was like, hey, that's good enough for me. But I soon realized there's a huge discrepancy between near mint and let's say gem mint. For near mint in PSA, that's a PSA 7. Near mint to mint is an 8. Mint is a 9 for PSA, and then gem mint is a 10. There's actually a huge range when it comes to raw cards that could be classified near mint or above. I oftentimes, what I realize is that you really got to be careful with eBay listings. A lot of sellers will try to overshoot and oversell their cards. Like they'll call a card near mint. I can find countless examples of this, but they would call it near mint, but have a bunch of whiting and maybe hollow scratches. And, I don't know why they would still call it near mint. I would never do that as a seller myself. So you got to be careful when buying from online sources, especially because you can't see the card in person. You do want to really I think some of the things to pay attention is the first thing I look for is the back, because the back is the easiest thing to look for, especially for some of the older cards. I think the flawed ones are often very obvious whitening in the back. If the back looks okay, then I'll take a look at the front for any hollow scratches, because that's, I think, another very easily damaged part of the card. So yeah, don't trust the title of the listing. Take a look for yourself. Make sure that you actually agree with the condition of the card, whether that's near mint or light plate or whatever you're expecting. Because a lot of times sellers will say something but not actually deliver. And don't be afraid to ask for more pictures. That's my other tip when it comes to this. Some sellers might not respond to you, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. There's always another copy again. For more expensive cards, I think sellers would be more inclined to present pictures to you, because they want to make the sale, right? Be sure to look at pictures, maybe even ask for video, especially these raw ones, right? Because when you're buying raw ones, you really want to inspect them, to shine the hollow under the light to see if there's any scratches. For more expensive cards, of course. Sellers probably don't want to do that for cheaper cards, just because, it's probably not worth their time. But I think for more expensive cards, sellers are more reasonable to this. Well, I think that's why, I actually like buying graded cards, because you don't have to worry about this. The grade is sort of more objective just because it's graded by a third-party company. So I think, the grade is generally not too different than what you would expect. However, even with graded cards, I would advise you guys to double check the condition. Make sure, if you're buying a 9, that it is truly a 9 and not like a 7 or an 8, because that does happen. You can definitely pick out some value if you can find cards that may be potential 10s. If you find like potential 9 cards that could be potential 10s, that could be a play. But also, I think if you're going for the 10s, right, I think this is the highest risk, because 10s are generally have a much higher of a premium and a price jump than any other grade. But the 10s will often, depending on the set. So I think for modern, it's actually pretty clean. But let's say if you're buying an EX card, the 10s are quite rare to begin with. Like if you look at any EX pop report, it's likely not too high in terms of the number of 10s that are graded. So what that results in is a lot of 10s are actually kind of flawed. Like if you look at the images and the scans closely, a lot of them will have whitening that, I would bet that if you resend some of those 10s back into PSA, they might get a 9. I think the reproducibility of this sort of vintage Pokemon cards are lower for 10s, in my opinion. I think a lot of the 10s are probably 10s because of the grader. Maybe they were in a good mood. Maybe it was a bit earlier, and if they have an older cert number, maybe PSA was sort of still establishing their grading for Pokemon, because they again, it's in the name, right? They're primarily grading sports. So I think TCGs such as Pokemon is quite a bit newer for them. So maybe in the earlier grading days, they were more lenient for some of their 10s that they were handing out. So that could be another possibility. But this boils down to, again, just double check the condition yourself. Make sure that if you are trying to buy a really pristine 10, that it is actually a 10 and not just a 9 in a 10 case. I think that would be the worst case, because you end up paying a bunch of premium over the label, right? Because we want the card at the end of the day. Yeah, and again, at the end of the day, PSA and BGS, CGC, these are major grading companies, but they still employ humans as their graders. So each human is subjective, right? Every human's gonna treat it differently, depending on how they're feeling, what they've gone through, so many variables, like just the type of grader they are. Like, do they like to give out more 10s? Are they more strict? Are they a newer grader, more experienced grader? It's not normalized. That's the issue. So you're going to get a spread of 9s and 10s for graded cards. So for sure, just keep this in mind. It'll help you guys out a ton. I think the other important thing is, what if PSA is no longer the I guess the sort of main grading company. What if another grading company is more dominant and accepted later on? Like maybe you want to convert your cards into that grading company and cross grade all your cards. The issue is if you paid such a premium for a 10 and the card inside isn't actually a 10, the value will go down, right? Like you paid so much more because you're betting on the fact that the PSA 10 is legit. When you pay a sort of premium for a high grade from, let's say, PSA or BGS black labels, you're also banking on the fact that the grading company will continue to be dominant and sort of the best option for collectors and reputable. But what if they become not reputable? You're also investing not only in the card, but now you're investing in the grading company. If, let's say, BGS black labels aren't reputable anymore and the grading company isn't reputable, I think the price will drop for the cards. And I don't like that. I don't like how I'm investing also in the grading company. I want to buy the cards that I want, right? Not ultimately have to have the value of the card super strongly associated with the grade. I guess that's just another reason to make sure that you're actually buying a quality card at the end of the day. And I think the last point I want to bring up is, buying raw cards from TCG Player. It's good in terms of ease of accessibility and finding a card pretty readily, but or bulk purchases. But the issue is oftentimes these regular cards, these set cards, they don't have pictures, especially for the cheaper ones. So when they don't have pictures, so you're relying on them to actually give you a condition that they specified. Since they use stock pictures, you can't see the exact card that you're getting, and that always bothered me. So for myself, I actually never buy from TCG Player unless it's like I want a volume, like a large amount of one card, then I'll buy from TCG Player. Or if it's a super modern card, then I'll maybe consider TCG Player. But if I'm trying to go for a more minty card, a card that I care a lot about condition, I don't think TCG Player is a good route to do that for. I think eBay is much better when you can actually see the exact card that you'll receive. I don't like, how TCG Player, it doesn't tell you, exactly what you're going to get. So sometimes it is a near mint if it's advertised as a near mint, but sometimes it looks like an LP or even a poor LP, but it's classified as a near mint. These are some of the considerations you should take when deciding on which buying platform to use. My fifth biggest mistake is organization. So this is really important. For myself, I keep track of all my Pokemon inventory using a spreadsheet that I made, an Excel spreadsheet to be specific. Basically, I have things like, what the grade is, what the Pokemon card name is, what grade it is, the current price. This kind of lets me keep track of what my sort of total money that I put into this hobby is. How much money do I have of my net worth that's actually in cards. This gives me a reality check sometimes. Maybe it reminds me, hey, I'm spending way too much on cards. Other useful apps are like Collector. I think that's a really nice app for tracking a lot of the raw cards. I think they have sealed and graded cards too now, I believe, that you can also track. So these are really cool resources and useful resources if you want to sort of just to see what you have, stay organized. I like to digitalize my stuff, so you can pull it out on your phone anytime. I think staying organized is extremely important, especially if we're trying to complete goals. I think I said this before that, in this hobby, oftentimes you want to pick a niche or pick a lane, a series that you want to collect in this hobby. I think having a tracker or some kind of organizational app really helps you stay on track because you can see what cards you're missing, what cards you already have. For myself, I have so many cards now, like raw cards, graded cards. I do need some kind of system to keep track and see, hey, do I have this copy already? And then like, what's the current price of this copy? So I think having that is really nice. It's almost like, you're tracking your stock portfolio. It's kind of fun in my opinion. And I think also, you can also see which cards you're missing. So when an opportunity presents itself, you can try to quickly capitalize on it. Staying organized also helps you know, for example, I made the mistake last month that I bought 2 of the same card because I forgot that I already had a raw copy of it for my collection. So if I was to keep better inventory beforehand, I would have known, hey, I already have this card. Maybe I can go for another card that I didn't have. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it looks really nice. You have an organized collection. So I like to organize my cards by, the year they were made, the sets. Also, I would like to organize it the same way through my Excel spreadsheets. I would organize it, see, my all my inventory all in one spot. It's satisfying. I think it motivates me to as well. And I find it super helpful just pulling up this card, knowing exactly where my cards are, and just being able to enjoy it whenever. It looks nice. If you guys haven't seen my first video, so this video is actually a follow-up of my first video, which you guys seem to like. So I'll have a link in the end screen to that first video on the top 5 collection mistakes. I hope this is helpful. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to. And please consider using affiliate links in the description below. Those are websites that I trust and use frequently. And if you guys have any kind of questions, please leave it, or comments, please leave it below. I love reading your guys' comments. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to me ramble. Hopefully this was somewhat helpful to you guys. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Peace out, guys.